Your name isn't on the VIP list anymore. Mrs. Whitmore. The young woman at the check-in table said it softly, as if lowering her voice could make the words less humiliating. But the microphone clipped to her blazer, carried them straight into the glittering lobby of the Langford Hotel. Cameras flashed behind me. Champagne glace chimed. Above the marble staircase, a silver banner read, Whitmore Group 25 years of vision, trust, and family. I looked down at the seating chart, expecting a mistake. Some careless error by an event assistant who had confused maiden names or table numbers. But there it was, printed in elegant black letters, where my place had always been, Sloan Mercer Foundation Chair nominee. Not Claire Whitmore. Not the wife of the CEO. Not the woman who had spent 6 years holding that company together, while my husband smiled for magazine covers. My fingers tightened around the small silver envelope in my clutch. The one my lawyer had told me not to open before 9 o'clock. I was still staring at the chart when the room changed. It was subtle at first. A small shift in attention, like wind turning every candle flame in the same direction. Then I heard the applause. Grant Whitmore descended the staircase in his midnight tuxedo. Dull, handsome, polished into the kind of man people trusted before he opened his mouth. On his arm was Sloan Mercer, wearing a white satin gown cut like a bridal dress. Her blonde hair swept over one shoulder, her hand resting possessively against his sleeve. She looked surprised to see me, but not startled. That was the cruelty of it. She had rehearsed this face. Grant stopped 3 steps from the bottom and looked at me as if I were an inconvenient memory he had forgotten to erase. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Claire, he said, his voice low but sharp enough to reach the people closest to us. Tonight is about the woman who actually helped me build this company. A strange silence opened around me. Wide and cold, I could feel the guests turning, recognizing me, judging the distance between my bare ring finger and Sloane's hand on my husband's arm. I had taken my wedding ring off only that morning because the skin beneath it had grown raw, not from metal, but from years of pretending. Sloane leaned closer to Grant, her eyes shining as though she were wounded by my existence. I told you she would be hurt, she murmured, just loud enough for the event photographer and 2 board members to hear. Maybe we should have warned security. A few faces tightened with pity. Not for me, for him. That was Sloane's gift. She could step on your throat and make everyone worry about her shoe. I wanted to say that I had negotiated the MercyCare acquisition, saved the pediatric wing contract, and found the missing $16 million before anyone else knew it was gone. Instead, I swallowed. Because Malcolm Pierce had warned me not before 9. Grant came down the final steps and walked past me without offering his arm, his apology, or even the decency of shame. Victoria Whitmore followed behind him in pearls and silver silk, her smile fixed for the cameras, her eyes cold when they passed over me. Claire, she said, as though greeting a former employee who had arrived drunk at a retirement dinner. I thought Grant made tonight's arrangements clear. He made nothing clear. I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. My husband removed my seat at our company gala and replaced it with his public relations director. Victoria's smile didn't move, but her nostrils flared. Our company, she repeated softly. My dear, answering emails from a corner office does not make you a founder. Sloane lowered her eyes, almost trembling with manufactured discomfort. Grant's jaw tightened. But not because his mother had insulted me, because I had said husband in front of cameras, and he had not yet controlled the story. Inside the ballroom, the humiliation became theater. My table, the front center table, beside the stage, had a white card with Sloane's name standing where mine had stood for 6 years. Beside it was Grant's card, angled toward hers, like a private joke. The seat on his other side belonged to Victoria. There was no seat for me anywhere in the room. I stood near the entrance as servers moved around me, carrying trays of champagne I had approved, beneath floral arches I had chosen, while guests pretended not to stare. On the stage, Grant tapped the microphone and smiled with the confidence of a man who believed the world still belonged to him. "Tonight," he said, "we honor not just Whitmore Group's past, but its future, and there is someone whose loyalty, grazie, and vision have helped me see what that future should be." Sloane pressed her fingers to her lips. The crowd softened. My stomach turned to ice. I could have laughed if it had not hurt so much. Loyalty, grace, vision. Sloane had joined Whitmore Group 14 months earlier and had nearly bankrupted the foundation with vanity campaigns, private dinners, and donor money that disappeared into consulting invoices no one could explain. I had found the first irregularity 3 weeks ago. A payment to Mercer Strategic, an entity registered under her brother's old apartment address. When I brought it to Grant, he told me I was becoming paranoid. When I printed the ledgers, the files vanished from my office. When I called Elliot Crane, "Ursiefou," he said, I no longer had clearance to review foundation accounts. And now Sloane stood under golden lights, while my husband called her the heart of the company. I looked toward the stage wings and saw Malcolm Pierce, the evening's host, watching me with a stillness that felt almost cruel. He glanced at his watch. 8:43. Then his eyes dropped to the silver envelope in my hand. The first glass of wine touched my dress like blood. Sloane had crossed the ballroom during the applause, smiling with a tenderness that made people lean in to witness her kindness. "Claire, I never wanted to hurt you," she said, placing one hand on my arm. Her nails pressed through the silk. "But Grant deserves peace. You know that, don't you?" I pulled back. Barely an inch, and her full glass tilted. Red wine spilled down the front of my navy gown. A few guests gasped. Before I could move, Sloane stumbled backward into the champagne table, sending flutes crashing across the marble floor. She clutched her wrist and looked up at me with tears already gathered. "Claire, please, stop," she cried. "I know you're angry, but don't hurt me." The room froze, then turned against me with terrifying ease. Grant reached her before I could speak, wrapping one arm around her waist, his face dark with fury. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed at me. Security arrived, as if they had been waiting for the cue. One man stood at my left, another at my right, not touching me yet, but close enough to make the message public. Victoria moved to Sloane's side and said loudly, "This is exactly why we tried to handle the separation privately." Separation. The word traveled through the crowd faster than the broken glass could be swept away. I looked at Grant. searching for the man who once slept on a hospital floor beside me when I had pneumonia. The man who cried when we signed the first lease for our tiny office above a dental clinic. The man who promised that if Whitmore ever became powerful, it would never make us cruel. But that man was gone. Or maybe he had only existed when he needed me. Grant pointed toward the side entrance. "Take her out," he said, "before she embarrasses herself more." My throat burned. But I did not beg. I only looked once at Malcolm Pierce. Malcolm stepped down from the stage and approached with the slow authority of a man nobody dared interrupt. For one wild second, I thought he would defend me. He had known my mother, Ileana Hart, before her name disappeared from Whitmore's history. He had sent the envelope. He had told me to come no matter what Grant said. But when he reached us, his expression remained unreadable. "Escort Mrs. Whitmore to the east elevator," he told security. The words struck like betrayal. Sloane's mouth curved before she hid it against Grant's shoulder. I turned to Malcolm, unable to keep the hurt from my face. As the security guard guided me toward the corridor, Malcolm passed close enough that only I heard him. 9 o'clock. He whispered, "Don't leave before 9. My pulse stopped. Then started again. I looked down at the silver envelope, stained now with one drop of Sloane's wine. 17 minutes. That was all I had to survive, before the room that had thrown me out would be forced to learn my name. The east elevator did not take me down to the parking garage. It rose, for 3 silent floors. I stood between 2 security guards with wine soaking through my dress, and my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The taller guard avoided my eyes, but the younger one looked almost ashamed. When the doors opened on the 26th floor, he stepped aside and handed me a black keycard without a word. The hallway was empty, carpeted in deep gray, lit by brass sconces that made the city windows look like mirrors. I saw myself reflected there, hair still pinned, face pâle, gown ruined, clutch pressed to my ribs, like a wound I was trying to hold closed. The younger guard cleared his throat. "Mr. Pierce said the owner's suite is ready." Owner's suite, not service exit, not holding room, not a place for discarded wives. My fingers closed around the card, and for the first time that night, fear made room for something colder. The suite door opened before I touched the keycard. Nadine Shaw stood inside, dressed in a charcoal suit, her silver hair pulled back, her expression as composed as a judge before sentencing. She had been my mother's attorney first, then mine, after Ileana Hart died with too many secrets and too few answers. Behind her, the suite looked nothing like the ballroom below. There were no flowers, no champagne, no carefully lit smiles, only a long walnut table, 3 leather folders, a laptop, and a portable safe with its lid open. "Claire," Nadine said gently. And that single word almost broke me, because it was the first time all night someone had said my name without trying to shrink it. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me. "They're saying I attacked her," I whispered. Nadine's eyes moved to the stain on my dress, then to the silver envelope in my hand. "Of course they are," she said. "People who steal a house always accuse the owner of trespassing." I should have asked what she meant, but my phone started vibrating so violently in my clutch that it rattled against the envelope. "Grant His name flashed across the screen once, twice, then disappeared. A text followed. Sign the papers quietly, and I'll make sure tonight doesn't destroy you. Another came before I finished reading the first. Don't force me to release the board report. I stared at those words until they blurred. Board report. That was what Sloane had been building. Then the edited videos. The missing files. The whispers about my instability. Nadine watched my face change. He brought the divorce papers, she asked. I nodded. And the waiver he tried to make me sign away all claims to Whitmore assets. Intellectual property. Past contribution. And foundation oversight. Nadine's mouth tightened. She reached into one of the leather folders and slid a document toward me. Across the top, in clean, legal type, was written, Forensic Signature Analysis, Preliminary Findings. Good, she said. Then, he has finally shown intent. Before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time, it was Mara Ellis. For one desperate second, hope moved faster than memory. Mara had been my closest friend at Whitmore. The woman who used to bring me coffee during all-night acquisition reviews. The woman who had cried in my office after her divorce and told me I was the only person in that building who treated assistants like human beings. I answered, Mada, thank God. I need you to tell them. Sloane changed the seating chart and cut that video. You saw the original file last week. There was a pause. Short, but fatal. Then Mara's voice came through. Stiff and too clear. Claire, please, stop dragging me into your marriage. You've been unstable for months. My hand went numb around the phone. In the background, I heard ballroom noise. Then Victoria's low murmur. Mara had me on speaker. You told me you were afraid of Sloane. I said, barely breathing. Mara replied, No, I told you I was afraid of what you might do to her. The call ended, but the betrayal stayed in the room like smoke. I stood there, staring at the dead screen. Remembering Mara laughing in my kitchen. Mara wearing my spare coat after a snowstorm. Mara promising me that if Sloane ever tried to bury the foundation audit, she would testify. Nadine did not rush me. That was her kindness. She let the silence hurt until I could stand inside it without falling. Sloane either paid her, I said finally, or threatened her. Nadine opened the second folder. Inside were printed emails, bank records, and one photograph of Mara outside a private club with Elliot Crane, Whitmore's CFO, both. She said, a deposit cleared into Mara's sister's medical debt account yesterday morning. 2 hours later, Elliot sent Mara a draft statement claiming, You behaved erratically in the office. My stomach twisted. Even Mara's betrayal had been engineered. Sloane had not simply stolen my chair. She had built a cage around me and lined it with familiar faces. Downstairs, Grant called again. This time Nadine pressed a button on the laptop, and his voice spilled through the sweet speakers before I answered. Claire, he said, breath tight with irritation. Not concern. You need to come back to the service hall and sign. Security is being generous because I asked them to be. Don't make me withdraw that. I looked at Nadine. She nodded once. I'm listening, I said. Grant exhaled, as if my obedience had been delayed, but not lost. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed me. Sloane is shaken. My mother is furious. And half the board saw you put your hands on her. I didn't touch her. That's not what people saw. The cruelty of that sentence was quiet, almost bored, and perception matters. Claire, you taught me that. Remember, you were always so good at cleaning up messes. So clean this one up. Sign the agreement. Leave tonight. In the morning, we'll announce that you're stepping away for health reasons. Health reasons. I almost laughed. But it came out as a breath, with no humor in it. You want to call me unstable. I want to protect you from worse. By taking my name off the company, you never had a name on the company. He snapped. And there he was. The real Grant, beneath the polished grief of a wronged husband. You had my last name. That opened doors for you. Don't confuse access with ownership. Nadine's eyes sharpened. She wrote something on a legal pad. I looked out at Chicago, glittering below us. Every window another witness that could not speak. And if I don't sign, I asked. Grant's voice lowered. Then Elliot releases the internal report. Misconduct. Harassment. Unauthorized access to foundation accounts. Possible data theft. I can't stop the board once it starts. Can't, I said softly. Or won't, for a moment. There was only static. Then Grant said, after tonight, you won't have a seat. Claire, don't make me take the floor from under you too. The line went dead. My knees weakened, but I refused to sit. Sitting felt too close to surrender. Nadine turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was the edited video Sloane had shown. Grant me in her office. One hand striking the desk. My mouth open in anger. Sloane stepping backward as if afraid. Without sound. I looked exactly like the woman they wanted me to be. Nadine clicked another file. The full recording began 3 minutes earlier. My voice filled the room. Controlled, but furious. Why did Mercer Strategic receive 4 transfers from the Pediatric Recovery Fund? Sloane's voice answered. Sweet and icy. You should be careful what you accuse people of when your husband already thinks you're unraveling. Then came the moment where I hit the desk. Not in violence, but because Sloane had smiled and said, no one will believe the wife he's tired of. Nadine paused the video. Evidence reversal, she said quietly. She gave us the knife and left her fingerprints on the handle. A knock sounded at the door. I stiffened, but Nadine checked the suite camera and opened it. Malcolm Pierce entered with the calm, grave presence he had carried in the ballroom. But now, I saw exhaustion beneath it. You held yourself better than most people would have, he said. I wanted to ask why he had let them drag me out. Instead, I heard myself say, you told them to escort me. I told them to bring you where Grant could not reach you before the transfer became irreversible. He placed a small velvet box on the table. Inside was an old brass key. The bow shaped like a tiny sunburst. My mother's mark. I had seen it on the pendant she wore in photographs from before I was born. Malcolm touched the box with 2 fingers. Your mother asked me to keep this until the night Whitmore tried to erase you as thoroughly as they erased her. My breath caught. For years, Elena Hart had been reduced to a footnote. A consultant. A woman who helped in the early days. What did they erase? I asked. Nadine opened the portable safe and removed a blue folder thick with old contracts. Your mother's founding technology built Whitmore's first hospital network, she said. She exchanged temporary control for capital after your father died. But she never surrendered her reversion rights. If Whitmore leadership committed fraud, forged an heir's consent, or misused charitable funds attached to her platform. Those rights could be activated. Malcolm checked his watch. At 8:43 tonight, Hearthstone Capital completed its final purchase block, combined with the heart reversion clause. You now control 64% of Whitmore Group. The room tilted, for a moment, to the Gala, the wine, Grant's voice, Sloane's tears. All of it seemed to drift far away. Hearthstone is mine, I whispered. Nadine's expression softened. It was always meant to be. Your mother built it as a shield. She hoped you would never need it. Downstairs. Applause rose through the floor, muffled and distant. Malcolm looked toward the ballroom beneath us. 9 o'clock is in 6 minutes. They are about to announce Sloane's future. We are going downstairs to announce yours. The suite changed after Malcolm said it. Not the furniture, not the lights, not the view of Chicago glittering beneath us, but the air itself. For the first time that night, the room did not feel like a place where I had been hidden. It felt like a place where something long buried had finally stood up. Nadine slid a fresh legal folder toward me, and on the first page was my mother's signature, Elena Marisol Hart. I traced the name without touching the ink, afraid my hand might tremble over it. She never told me, I said. My voice sounded small, younger than 33, almost like the girl who had sat beside a closed casket while Whitmore men in expensive suits called her mother brilliant but difficult. Malcolm's face softened. Your mother knew the Whitmores would fight harder if they knew you understood what she left you. So she built a mechanism they could not see until they violated it. I looked at the ballroom feed glowing on the laptop screen. Grant was smiling again below us. He had no idea. The floor beneath him had already moved. On the monitor, the Gala had resumed its rhythm with frightening ease. Servers had swept away the broken champagne flutes. A staff member had replaced the stained tablecloth. Sloane sat at the front table with Victoria's hand wrapped protectively around hers, playing the wounded woman so well that even some bored wives leaned close to comfort her. Grant stood near the stage, speaking with Elliot Crane, whose eyes kept moving nervously toward his phone. I watched Elliot whisper something to Grant, then saw Grant's face tighten. He knows something is wrong, Nadine said. She enlarged the feed from the ballroom side corridor. Elliot was typing fast, one thumb shaking. On Nadine's second laptop, a cybersecurity dashboard lit with red alerts. He is trying to access the Foundation accounts, she said. They were frozen 7 minutes ago, under the authority of the controlling shareholder. Controlling shareholder. The phrase felt unreal. Too large for the woman in the wine-stained gown staring back at me from the dark window. Yet every time I looked at Sloane's hand resting on my husband's sleeve, the words became easier to believe. Malcolm took the silver envelope from the table and turned it gently between his fingers. This is the final packet, he said. Your mother intended the key to open her private safe deposit box, but Nadine moved the contents here after Grant's legal team began pressuring you last month. I frowned. Grant's team, Nadine's gaze sharpened with the careful anger lawyers reserved for people who forge documents badly and arrogantly. The divorce waiver he tried to force you to sign tonight was not their first attempt. 3 months ago, a consent document was filed stating that you voluntarily released any inherited claim connected to Elena Hart's intellectual property. She opened another scan. My name appeared at the bottom in a signature close enough to fool a careless eye and ugly enough to make my skin crawl. I never signed that. We know, Nadine said. Your real signature has a break before the W in Whitmore. This one doesn't. The forensic report proves it was copied from a holiday card you signed for the foundation. My stomach turned. They had taken my kindness, scanned it, and weaponized it against my mother's legacy. From the laptop speakers, Sloane's voice suddenly came through. Thin, but clear. Someone downstairs had left a preparation room microphone live. You need to say it before Malcolm gets back on stage. She hissed. The camera angle showed only part of the room. White roses. A vanity mirror. Grant's shoulder. Sloane's reflection standing behind him. Her wounded expression was gone. Without the audience. Her face looked hard. Almost furious. Say what Grant asked. That I'm carrying your child. That Claire attacked me because she found out that I need protection from her. Grant turned away from the mirror. Sloane. We agreed to wait. We agreed Claire would be gone by now. She snapped. She's not gone. Pierce moved her somewhere. Elliot can't get into the accounts. And if she opens her mouth about the foundation audit, everything becomes complicated. Grant's silence told me more than a denial could have. He knew about the audit. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the shell company or the transfers. But he had known enough to choose blindness because blindness protected him. I gripped the edge of the table until the polished wood pressed lines into my palms. She's not pregnant, Nadine said quietly, as if placing a blade exactly where it belonged. She opened another file. We obtained the medical release through the clinic after Sloane used a forged donor reimbursement code connected to Whitmore Foundation. There is no pregnancy. The document she showed Grant came from a closed imaging center in Indiana. The license number belongs to a retired dentist. I stared at the screen where Sloane had placed both hands over her stomach and lowered her voice into something trembling and theatrical. If you don't claim me tonight, Grant, she'll keep hurting us. Your mother understands. The board understands. Why don't you? Grant rubbed his face. Exhausted and cornered. But not innocent. Because announcing that now will make me look reckless. Sloane laughed once. Cold and sharp. No. It will make you look like a man protecting his family from a bitter wife. Bitter wife. There it was again. The cage. The label. The story they needed me to wear, so nobody would ask what they had stolen. Malcolm's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at Nadine. Elliot just sent a memo to the board, claiming Claire was removed from the gala due to threats against an expectant mother. Nadine's smile was brief and dangerous. Good. Defamation in writing. I should have felt satisfaction. But what moved through me instead was grief, so old it startled me. I remembered Grant in our first office, eating vending machine crackers at midnight while I built spreadsheets on a borrowed laptop. He used to kiss the top of my head and say, "One day, when they put my name on the building, you'll know half of it is yours." I had believed that meant love. Now, I understood he had always wanted the building to carry his name, while my half remained private. Invisible. Useful. On the screen. He straightened his tuxedo and looked at Sloane. "Fine," he said. "I'll announce it after the foundation chair nomination." Something inside me closed. Not broke. Closed. A door I had held open for 6 years, finally shut without a sound. Nadine placed the USB from the silver envelope into my hand. This contains the full Sloane office recording, the original foundation ledger, The hallway camera from tonight. Mara's payment records. The forged consent report. And the clinic file. Once Malcolm begins, the evidence will populate to the Gala screens and the board tablets simultaneously. You do not need to argue. You only need to stand there and let the facts breathe. I looked down at my ruined dress. The wine had dried into a dark red streak from my ribs to my hip. I looked like they already defeated me. I said. Malcolm shook his head. No. You look like they made their final mistake in public. Nadine reached for a small velvet tray and set my wedding ring on it. I had forgotten I placed it there after the call with Grant. The gold looked smaller now, almost harmless, like a costume piece from a life I had outgrown. I touched it once, not with longing, but farewell. He'll say this is revenge, I said. Nadine answered. Then, let him. Revenge is what guilty people call consequences when they arrive, dressed well. At 8:59, the three of us walked toward the private elevator. My heels clicked against the marble. Each step steadier than the last. The younger security guard from earlier stood waiting by the doors. This time, he did not look ashamed. He looked relieved. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, then corrected himself, as if he already knew the world had shifted. Ms. Hart. The east entrance to the ballroom is clear. Ms. Hart. My mother's name struck me harder than the applause rising from below. I had spent years being Mrs. Whitmore, because I thought belonging meant being chosen by a family powerful enough to protect me. But my mother had protected me from the grave with contracts, case, and patience sharper than any weapon. As the elevator descended, Malcolm adjusted his cufflinks and said, Grant is about to introduce Sloane as the future of Whitmore. I watched the numbers fall. 21, 18, 15. The silver envelope rested against my heart. Then, let him finish the lie. I said, it will make the truth louder. Grant was already on stage when the ballroom doors opened for me. He stood beneath the white gold lights with one hand resting on the podium. His smile broad enough for the cameras but too tight at the corners. Sloane sat at the front table. One palm pressed delicately to her stomach. The other folded inside Victoria's hand, like a daughter being welcomed into a dynasty. The guests had leaned forward, hungry for the announcement Grant had trained them to expect. I stepped in from the east entrance with Malcolm Pierce on my left and Nadine Shaw on my right. And for a second, no one noticed me. That second mattered. It let me see the room without flinching. The board members who had avoided my eyes. The reporters already composing tomorrow's scandal. Mara Ellis near the bar, white-faced, clutching her phone like it might save her. Then Grant said into the microphone, Tonight, I want to honor the woman brave enough to stand beside me when others chose bitterness. And every head turned as I walked in, with wine still staining my dress. The silence did not fall all at once. It rippled outward, table by table, until even the string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Grant saw me and froze, his hand tightening around the podium. Sloane's expression changed faster than anyone else's first confusion, then fear, then the wounded mask snapping back into place. She stood too quickly, almost knocking her chair behind her. Claire, she said, lifting her voice so the nearest cameras could hear. Please, don't make another scene. Think about the baby. A few guests gasped. Victoria rose beside her, eyes blazing with triumph, as if Sloane had just played the winning card. Grant swallowed, then tried to recover. Security, he said, but his voice cracked on the second syllable. Malcolm did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Security will remain exactly where they are, he said, walking past Grant toward the center of the stage. This gala has a legal obligation to proceed with a scheduled ownership disclosure. Grant turned toward him sharply. Malcolm, this is not the time. Malcolm looked at him with the patience of a man who had been waiting years for precisely this moment. On the contrary, Mr. Whitmore, this is the only time that matters. He took the microphone from the stand before Grant could stop him. Behind us, the enormous screen shifted from Whitmore's anniversary logo to a dark blue holding slide marked Hearthstone Capital. A murmur moved through the room. Investors recognized that name. Board members did too. Grant's face drained of color. Elliot Crane, standing near the side aisle, took one step backward, as if distance could erase his fingerprints from paper. Malcolm unfolded a single page. At opt patruzeci și trei m. This evening, Hearthstone Capital completed its acquisition of the final voting block required for controlling interest in Whitmore Group. In combination with the heart reversion rights previously triggered by documented fiduciary violations, majority control now rests with one individual. He turned toward me. Please, welcome the new majority owner and chairwoman of Whitmore Group, Claire Hart Whitmore. For one impossible heartbeat, no one moved. I heard the air conditioning hum above the chandeliers. I heard someone drop a fork. Then the cameras exploded in white flashes. Grant reached for the microphone, but Nadine stepped between us and placed one hand on the podium. Do not touch the equipment, she said calmly. Everything is being recorded for legal review. Grant stared at me as if I had become a stranger wearing his wife's face. This is absurd, he said, loud enough for the room. Claire has no controlling interest in anything. She has never held an executive title. I walked to the front of the stage, feeling the stain on my dress pull stiffly with each step. You're right, I said into the microphone. Malcolm offered me. I never needed the title you withheld from me. I needed the documents you thought I would never find. The screen behind us changed again. My mother's signature appeared first, elegant and fierce beneath the words, Elena Hart, Founding Technology Agreement. The first wave of evidence was quiet, almost boring in the way truth often is before it destroys a lie. Nadine explained the heart reversion clause, the trust, the Hearthstone purchase blocks, the voting majority. The legal language rolled across the screen beside charts and signatures, while the room tried to understand how the wife they had pitied 5 minutes ago had become the woman who owned the building under their feet. Grant interrupted twice, calling it manipulation, calling it grief, calling it a stunt. Then Nadine displayed the forensic report. My forged signature appeared beside my real one, both enlarged, until every difference became impossible to ignore. This consent document, Nadine said, was filed 3 months ago to extinguish Mrs. Whitmore's inherited claims. Independent analysis confirms it was not signed by her. A board member whispered something I could not hear. Elliot Crane looked toward the nearest exit. Malcolm spoke without looking away from him. Mr. Crane. Leaving this room before counsel finishes would be deeply unwise. Sloane tried to save herself with tears. She stepped into the aisle, one hand still on her stomach, her voice shaking beautifully. "This is cruel," she said. "Whatever Claire thinks I did, I am pregnant. Stress like this could hurt Grant's child." The room reacted exactly as she hoped. Sympathy flickered. Uncertain but alive, Grant moved toward her instinctively. Because Grant had always chosen the scene that made him look noble, I looked at Nadine. She pressed one key. The screen changed to a medical document, with identifying details redacted except for Sloane's name. The clinic code and the issuing facility. Nadine's voice remained even. The pregnancy confirmation, Mistress, Mercer circulated, was generated using a license number belonging to a retired dentist. The imaging center listed on the document closed 4 years ago. Whitmore Foundation donor reimbursement codes were used to purchase the falsified file. Sloane's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Victoria's hand slipped away from hers as if Sloane had become contagious. The guests who had gasped for her now stared with the cold hunger of people realizing they had been tricked. Then came the video. Not Sloane's edited version. Not the silent clip that made me look violent, but the full recording from her office. My voice filled the ballroom. Why did Mercer Strategic receive 4 transfers from the Pediatric Recovery Fund? Sloane's recorded laugh followed. Soft and poisonous. No one will believe the wife he's tired of. The room shifted physically, as if everyone had leaned away from her at once. Mara covered her mouth. Elliot closed his eyes. The footage continued, showing Sloane telling me Grant was easy to guide when his pride was fed, showing her threatening to paint me as unstable if I touched the foundation audit. Then the hallway camera from earlier that evening appeared, Sloane deliberately tilting the glass, stumbling backward before I moved, arranging her face into terror only after she knew people were watching. I did not look at Grant while the room watched it. I did not need his shock. I needed him to hear every second of the truth he had refused when it came from me. Grant finally turned on Sloane. But even that was not love for me. It was panic for himself. "What did you do?" he demanded. Sloane snapped back, her mask cracking in front of everyone. "What I had to do because you couldn't control your wife." The microphone at the stage edge caught enough of it for the first rows to hear. Malcolm nodded to the technician. The final audio file played through the speakers Grant's voice from the preparation room, saying, "After tonight, Claire won't have a name, a seat, or $1 left to fight us." Then Sloane's voice, "No one will question you if you say she's unstable." Grant staggered back as if the recording had struck him. Around the ballroom, phones rose higher. Reporters whispered into live feeds. Victoria sat down slowly, her pearls bright against a face that had gone grey. The public story had reversed completely. I was no longer the bitter wife at the door. I was the owner standing in the wreckage of their plan, holding the match they had lit themselves. I took the microphone with both hands, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted my voice steady enough to reach every person who had watched them drag me away. Effective immediately. Grant Whitmore is suspended from his duties as CEO pending a full fiduciary and criminal review. Elliot Crane is terminated for cause and will be escorted to preserve company records. Sloane Mercer is removed from all Whitmore properties, systems, and foundation access. The Pediatric Recovery Fund will be audited by an independent firm, and every stolen dollar will be returned before anyone in this room pours another glass of champagne in its name. No one applauded. It was better that way. Applause would have made it entertainment. Silence made it judgment. Grant stepped toward me, his face stripped of polish. "Claire, please," he said. "We can talk as husband and wife." I looked at the man who had replaced me in public and wanted mercy in private. "You stopped being my husband," I said, "the moment you used my silence as your stage." Then I walked past him, leaving my ruined dress and my mother's name on every screen in the room. The morning after the gala, my face was on every business page in Chicago, but not in the way Sloane had planned. There were photographs of Grant reaching for the microphone, of Sloane standing frozen beneath her own falsified clinic record, of me in a wine-stained gown, while the screen behind me displayed my mother's name. The headlines called it a corporate coup, a society scandal, a dynasty collapse. None of them knew how quiet the real aftermath was. It was not thunder. It was conference rooms, locked files, legal holds, auditors in gray suits, and employees whispering in hallways they had once crossed confidently under Grant's portrait. By noon, Elliot Crane had surrendered his company laptop. By 3, the independent audit found the first redirected foundation payment. By nightfall, Mercer Strategic was no longer just a suspicious vendor. It was evidence. I sat in my office, the one Grant had once called decorative, and watched men who had ignored my emails for years ask me where to sign. Sloane did not fall gracefully. People like her rarely do, because grace requires accepting the ground. First, she released a statement claiming she had been misled by Grant. Then, another claiming she was emotionally distressed. Then, a third, through an attorney, accusing Whitmore Group of retaliating against a pregnant woman. Nadine answered with documents. Not drama. The forged medical record, the donor reimbursement trail, the shell company invoices, the hallway camera, the office recording. Each time Sloane tried to become the victim again. The facts pulled another piece of costume from her body. Within 2 weeks, 3 charities cut ties with her. Her PR license came under review, and a federal investigator asked why pediatric recovery funds had paid for private image consultants, hotel suites, and a consulting retainer to her brother. The last time I saw her, she was outside the courthouse in dark sunglasses, shouting that I had ruined her life. I did not answer. She had confused exposure with cruelty, just as Grant had confused silence with weakness. Mara came to me on the 17th day. She waited outside my office for almost an hour before my assistant asked if I wanted security to remove her. I almost said yes. Then I remembered her at my kitchen table years ago, crying into a mug of tea. And I hated that memory for still being tender. When she entered, she looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the bright confidence Sloane had rented for her. My sister's treatments were overdue, she said before I could speak. Elliot said if I helped them, the debt would disappear. Then Sloane said if I didn't, they would make it look like I helped you access restricted files. She started crying, but I had learned not to make tears my responsibility. You put me on speaker, I said. You knew I was alone, and you made the room colder. Mara covered her mouth. I'm sorry. I believed she was. I also knew sorry could not rebuild trust that had been sold with an invoice number attached. I let her keep her job only long enough to testify, then accepted her resignation. Victoria Whitmore resisted longer than anyone. Her first message was not an apology but a warning. Do not destroy this family out of anger. I stared at it for several minutes before deleting it. The second came through her attorney, requesting a private meeting to preserve the Whitmore legacy. The third arrived after Elliot's cooperation agreement, named her in the pressure campaign to force my signature on the waiver. She came to my office dressed in black, pearls still at her throat. But her posture had changed. Without Grant's power behind her, she looked like a woman standing in a house after the roof had been removed. I did not know about the stolen charity funds. She said, "But you knew about the forged pressure." I replied. Her lips trembled. "I thought you were trying to take what belonged to my son." I looked at the framed copy of Elena Hart's founding agreement on the wall. "No, Victoria. I was trying to keep what belonged to my mother." She lowered her eyes. And for once, silence did not belong to her. It belonged to me. Grant waited 31 days before asking to see me without lawyers. I agreed only because Nadine had already secured everything that mattered. We met in the empty ballroom of the Langford Hotel, the same room where he had tried to erase me, without flowers, music, and chimeras. The space looked almost ordinary. Grant stood near the stage in a grey coat, thinner than before, his face unshaven, his confidence gone in uneven pieces. "I brought something," he said, placing a cardboard banker's box on the table between us. Inside were printed emails, board memos, and letters from his father's old files. My father knew about Elena's reversion rights. He buried them. My mother suspected. I found proof years ago. I looked at him, and something in my chest went very still. Years ago, he nodded. Shame breaking his voice. I told myself it was old history. Then when your lawyer started asking questions, I panicked. I let Sloane convince me you were coming after me. "No," I said. "You let her convince you that I deserved it." He cried then. Not loudly, not beautifully, but with the ugly helplessness of a man who had finally discovered that regret could not negotiate. "I loved you, Claire," he said. "I still do. Once." Those words would have undone me. I would have searched his face for the boy from the office above the dental clinic, the one who warmed canned soup in a microwave and promised we would never become like the people who looked down on us. But love that only speaks after consequences arrive is not courage. It is survival wearing perfume. "I loved you too," I said. "That is why I waited for you to defend me. At the gala, in the hallway, on the phone, even after the wine, even after security. I waited for one sentence that proved you remembered who I was." Grant covered his face. "Claire, you remembered," I said softly. "You just decided remembering me would cost too much." The board voted unanimously to remove Grant permanently as CEO. The lawsuits continued for months, but the company did not collapse. That surprised people who had mistaken Grant's face for Whitmore's foundation. Employees who had been afraid to speak began sending files, notes, old warnings ignored by Elliot, evidence of Sloane's pressure campaigns. We recovered most of the stolen foundation money and doubled it from executive clawbacks. Then I did the one thing Victoria called unforgivable. I renamed Whitmore Group. At the annual shareholder meeting, the old logo disappeared from the screen, and in its place appeared Hartwell Health Systems. Heart for my mother. Well, for the patients whose trust had been treated like a marketing slogan. I stood at the podium and announced the Elena Hart Pediatric Recovery Fund. Fully independent, externally audited, and protected from executive access. Nobody mentioned Grant's vision that day. Nobody mentioned Sloane's grace. For the first time in 25 years, the company told the truth about the woman who built its bones. 1 year later, I returned to the Langford Hotel for a gala. I almost cancelled twice. Not because I feared the room, but because part of me still remembered standing by the entrance with wine on my dress, while strangers decided what kind of woman I was. Malcolm walked beside me this time, older somehow, but smiling. Nadine stood near the stage with the quiet satisfaction of a person who had watched justice take the long road and arrive on time. In the lobby, where the old seating chart had once erased me, there was now a framed silver envelope beneath glass. Inside it were the brass key, a copy of my mother's signature, and a small card in her handwriting that Nadine had found in the safe deposit box. It read, "Never beg for a seat at a table built from your own bones." I touched the glass once, then stepped into the ballroom before my name was announced. When the applause came, I did not mistake it for love. Applause is easy when power has changed hands, but I accepted it as witness. Grant was not there. He had written once, months earlier, saying he was entering a smaller life and trying to become someone who no longer needed a stage to feel real. I wished him the discipline to mean it, but I did not answer. Forgiveness, I had learned, was not a door everyone deserved to walk through. Sometimes it was simply putting down the weight of hating them. That night, I spoke about trust, not as a slogan, but as a debt leadership pays every day or loses the right to lead. When I finished, I looked across the room at employees, nurses, donors, patients' families, people who now knew my mother's name, and I felt no need to prove I belonged. The company, the room, the future. None of it had been given to me by Grant Whitmore. It had been waiting for me to stop asking permission to claim it.